Now, 29 years after the assassination of SACP leader Chris Hani, a remembrance ceremony has been held in Boksburg. His widow, Limpho, used the remembrance ceremony to urge those in government to prioritise service delivery, such as education.
We have schools in other provinces where children are still studying under the trees. And really, after 28 years, I must say, I don't want to say we have failed, but we haven't really done our job. And I appeal to the leadership. I'm glad that Comrade Jeff Radebe, Linda Demantashe, Comrade Blade, Dade Tulas, you all sit in the cabinet. Oh, sorry, Comrade Jeff, I forgot that you are no more in the cabinet. However, you are still influential. Please, 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 I appeal to those who are in power to make sure that we don't have children studying under trees. We have to make sure that children at school don't use pit toilets. That's all I'm asking for.
So 29 years on, what impact did that assassination actually have on this country's trajectory? We speak to historian Professor Chitja Twala, who is with the Department of History at the University of the Free State. Professor, thank you so much for your time and thank you for joining us. Throughout much of today, there's been a lot of reflection on what is believed Chris Hani in fact actually fought for. Talk to us about the significance of his death at 29 years on.
Thank you very much, Ntokozo, for having me here on this platform to take you through the trajectory of the legacy of Chris Hani. Although it is unfortunate that we talk about people when they are gone, but however, it is important that we track their footsteps and try to engage and highlight what they stood for. We all know that April 1993, it was a rather difficult month for the liberation movement because on the 10th of April, Chris Hani was assassinated, and on the 24th of April 1993, that was the death of O.R. Tambo. We all know how Chris Hani was assassinated. When history books are rewritten, Chris Hani's name will also feature prominently in as far as the role that he played in the liberation struggle of this country. It is important that when we deal and commemorate his death 29 years thereafter, we need to look back as to the values of Chris Hani and then what he stood for and the values of the South African Communist Party, which he was the Secretary General. It is important also to note historically that he played a significant role in exile for the liberation movement. He operated in Lesotho, and then his role in Lesotho was known, and on many occasions he was attacked by the South African Defence Force in Lesotho, and then there were attempts to his life and to his family. And then when we reflect on Chris Hani and the role played by other liberation stars like Chris Hani, we need not to forget that they died and their death was not in vain. It is also important for us to reflect that while he was in Lesotho, he operated with other people from within the country, and other people who went as youngsters into exile, and those who went to Lesotho were hosted by Chris Hani in Lesotho and initiated by Chris Hani into the ANC in Lesotho. He was not operating alone in Lesotho, and then we need also to understand that he operated with other people. And then we can't also look down upon the role played by the National University of Lesotho in trying to to help the liberation movement, and at some point it became the springboard for political activism with the people like Ndadeswa Santo and then people like Professor Rock Ajulu, who were also operating with Chris Hani inside the country, the Mountain Kingdom.
Mm. You know, Professor, oftentimes when we do reflect on the legacy of Chris Hani, he is an icon that is lionized. Oftentimes he is much larger than life. I mean, I remember seeing a quote by Nelson Mandela referring to Chris Hani as one of the greatest revolutionary leaders that this country has ever seen. And because of statements like that, because of how lionized an individual he is, oftentimes as South Africans, we reflect on what South Africa would look like today if, in fact, he hadn't been assassinated so tragically on that day. Is that a fair sort of reflection for us to have today, 29 years on, to think, would South Africa look completely different to what it does today had he not, in fact, been assassinated on that day?
It is unfortunate that the evolution of political activism and the politicization of the country's governance also holds some water in terms of the trajectory that we are talking about. Chris Hani, before his assassination in 1993, he was the most popular political figure after Nelson Mandela. And then he would speak his mind, and then whether you like it or not, but he would also try by all means to articulate what was in his mind. And that helped him a lot because people knew him as a straightforward kind of a political leader who would tell people that a spade is a spade and not an implement for manual labor. And that is what we need from our political leaders. People who have got some values, people who can stand the test of time, and people who can also challenge what is wrong in terms of governance and in terms of leadership. You will recall that during the Morogoro conference in the late 1960s, there was something that was called the Chris Hani Memorandum, of which Chris Hani was nearly expelled from the ANC because of challenging the leadership of the ANC in exile. Therefore, that is what makes Chris Hani a very important figure in the liberation history of this country. And then when we write history books, we must not write about Chris Hani as a pass-away by kind of a leader, but we must scrutinize the role he played. But we cannot do that until such time that we get the truth about his assassination. Who were the people who masterminded the assassination of Chris Hani? Where does that Z88 gun come from? And it is important that we track all that kind of information. And then who initiated Lucy to go and pull the trigger? And then whose car was used as a getaway car after the assassination? And how long did it take for the people to map up the way forward of assassinating Chris Hani? In order for us, when we write history books, we need to write history books and having the truth in mind, and then we put that truth on paper in order for future generations to can accede and to can have access to that kind of information. And that is important. And that comes after the backdrop also of the Minister of Basic Education, who said last week that we need to rewrite our history. And I think when we rewrite our history, we need also to tell the truth about exactly what happened. But we can't tell the truth if the truth is not coming forth.
Mm. Talking about the truth of Chris Hani's assassination, SACP current leader today, Dr. Bladen Nzimande, at these commemoration events that we bore witness to, did talk about this gaping wound that this lack of resolution when it comes to the truth of Chris Hani's assassination has left the South African society with. But of course, his case is not in isolation. We know of a number of apartheid-era cases that are still in need of proper prosecution. The NPA has promised to get underway with those cases. But but yet again we have this truth that is lacking, this closure that as a country we still don't have. What is the significance or the impact of a history such as ours that still has these gaping wounds, these gaping holes, to which South Africans have been unable to fill, to adequately fill?
Unfortunately, the wounds won't get healed unless people get the truth, unless the families of those who were killed outside the country by the then regime, if the truth is not coming forth, unfortunately, we are not going to have closure. And it is important that Chris Hani is symbolizing many of such people who went into exile and never returned, and then who went into exile, and some of them were assassinated in exile. And some of the family members, they do not know the graves of their loved ones even today. And it has happened also in Mangaung, in the Free State, and then we've got a lot of people who just disappeared and vanished like others, and then whose families are still lamenting even today about the graves of their loved ones. It is so unfortunate, culturally and historically speaking, that you have your loved one disappearing, and then when people came back from exile in 1989, 1991, and then your loved one is not coming back. And that is the wound that is not going to heal, especially that South Africa embarked on the process of having the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And the Truth and Reconciliation Commission was supposed to unearth the truth, but unfortunately, some people decided not to come forth in order to tell the truth as what happened actually inside the country and outside the country, for those people to know, for the families to know the whereabouts of their loved ones. Unfortunately, we don't have that kind of information, and then we are still going to dig even further from the historical point of view.
Professor Twala, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon, and of course for sharing your insights with us on this important conversation.